Tonight we begin a long, gentle journey together, one that will carry us softly through centuries, across seas and continents, and into the stories of the British Empire. So, before we drift away, I invite you to settle in. Dim your lights, pull your blanket close, and let the weight of the day slip quietly from your shoulders. And as you settle into this quiet space, I wonder, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And what time is it there, in your own calm corner? If this calm journey helps you unwind, you might tap like or subscribe, but only if it feels right. For now, just breathe deeply, let the rhythm of history rock you like a lullaby, and allow your imagination to wander gently into the past. Our story begins far back, at the edge of the 16th century. Picture England in the days of Queen Elizabeth I. The streets of London still narrow and muddy, the air filled with the sound of church bells, market traders, and the faint scent of coal smoke drifting from chimneys. Across the Thames, the masts of ships sway against the skyline, their sails furled, their hulls creaking as they wait for voyages not yet imagined. This is a kingdom not yet an empire, a nation small compared to Spain or Portugal, whose ships already circle the globe. But ambition stirs here, in taverns and courts alike. Sailors whisper of distant lands, merchants dream of spices and silks, and poets, like Shakespeare, fill the air with words that capture the imagination of a people beginning to look outward. Can you imagine those first voyages? Wooden ships, their decks crowded with sailors, barrels of salted fish, and ropes coiled neatly against the mast. The sea salt sprays across the faces of men who had never before left their island shores. The creak of timber, the crack of sails in the wind, and the endless horizon stretching like an invitation. One of these men is Francis Drake, bold and restless. In 1577 he set sail to circumnavigate the globe, raiding Spanish ships along the way, bringing home treasure that glitters in the eyes of the Queen. His return is not just a triumph of exploration, it is a symbol of possibility. England, small though it may be, could play on the world stage. And then there is the East India Company, founded in 1600 with a royal charter. Imagine parchment signed by the Queen, its ink still dark, granting merchants the right to trade in distant lands. At first, it seems only commerce, silks, tea and spices carried from Asia. But seeds are being planted quietly, almost without notice, of something far larger, an empire that would grow century by century until the sun seemed never to set upon it. Isn't it fascinating to think of how softly it began? Not with the thunder of cannons, but with whispers in court, parchment signed by candlelight, and ships pushing gently from the docks of London, their sails catching the wind. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the harbour. The sound of gulls, the lapping of the Thames against the shore, the shouts of sailors preparing to leave. A mother waves goodbye to her son, her voice carried away on the breeze. The ship moves slowly downriver, past fields and cottages, toward the sea and toward history. This was the beginning of the British Empire, a small island nation sending out ships, unaware of just how vast, how complex, how tangled its story would become. For now, it is only the sound of sails, the creak of wood, and the hush of waves carrying us into the dawn of empire. And as we leave that quiet harbour tonight, let your mind drift with the tide. Ahead lies adventure, trade, conquest and culture, all told gently, step by step. For now, rest in the rhythm of the sea, and we'll journey further when the next chapter calls us forward. The tide has carried us gently into the early 1600s, where England's first bold steps beyond its shores are beginning to take root. Imagine the world of that time. Oceans vast and uncertain, maps incomplete, rumours of wealth drifting like stories told around a fire. The Spanish and Portuguese already hold glittering empires, yet England, small and determined, begins to carve out its place. One of the earliest footholds is in the New World. Picture a group of settlers landing in Virginia in 1607, founding the small and fragile colony of Jamestown. The land is wild and unfamiliar, the winters harsh, and supplies from England uncertain. Many struggle, yet the colony endures, clinging to survival with a mixture of stubbornness and hope. Tobacco soon grows in these soils. curling green leaves that will become the colony's lifeline. The smoke of this new crop drifts across the Atlantic, filling English pipes and purses alike. Across the ocean, the East India Company is busy planting its own routes. Ships sail around the Cape of Good Hope into the Indian Ocean, their holds heavy with cloth, spices and tea. Imagine stepping into a warehouse in London, the air perfumed with pepper, cinnamon and cloves, their aromas unfamiliar yet irresistible. Merchants haggle over prices, their ledgers filling with neat columns of numbers, each line a thread in the growing web of trade. Back at home, London itself hums with change. The Globe Theatre fills with laughter and applause, its wooden beams creaking as crowds gather to watch plays unfold. Street markets bustle, their stalls laden with bread, meat pies and tankards of ale. And in the taverns, sailors tell stories of seas filled with storms, of distant islands where coconuts fall like gifts from the trees, of golden treasures glimpsed in Spanish galleons. Can you picture the wonder that such tales inspired? To many, these far-off lands seemed as distant as dreams, yet now they were tied by ships, by trade, by whispers of empire. Not all ventures were triumphant. Expeditions failed, ships sank, colonies faltered. But each setback taught lessons, and each return carried knowledge of winds, stars and coastlines. The empire was not yet an empire. It was a fragile idea, tested against storms, hunger and the unknown. And then, in the Caribbean, small islands began to change the course of it all. Barbados, Jamaica and others soon became centres of sugar production. Fields stretched wide, glistening green beneath the sun, their stalks cut and boiled into sweet crystals that would transform diets and fortunes alike. Sugar, white, crystalline, addictive, flowed back to England, where it sweetened tea, cakes and puddings. Yet behind this sweetness was hardship, for enslaved people from Africa were forced into brutal labour, their voices silenced beneath the hum of mills and the wealth of merchants. Isn't it striking how empire was always a mix of wonder and shadow, the thrill of discovery, the taste of new foods, the promise of wealth, and the heavy cost borne by those who had no choice? As the century moved forward, England's sails spread wider. North America, the Caribbean, the coasts of India, all touched by ships that left from the Thames. The sound of hammers building docks, the creak of ropes hauling sails, the splash of oars in the river, all of it carried the rhythm of expansion. And so, as night deepens, imagine standing on the deck of a ship bound for the horizon. The stars stretch endless above, guiding the way. The sea is calm for now, its surface silver in moonlight. Ahead lies more land, more trade, more conflict and more stories. Let the waves carry you gently, their rhythm steady and soft, as we drift onward into the growing story of empire. The century turns now into the later 1600s, and the sails of England stretch further still. The hum of the empire grows louder, though it is still fragile, still finding its balance. Imagine the harbours of London crowded with ships, their masts like forests of wooden rope. The air smells of tar, salt and spices. Merchants count coins in their pockets, and sailors whistle softly as they prepare to leave once again. Across the Atlantic, the colonies in North America begin to take deeper root. Towns like Boston, New York and Charleston stir with life. Wooden houses rise along dirt streets. Churches ring with bells, and marketplaces hum with voices of settlers and traders. Ships arrive carrying cloth, tools and furniture, while barrels of tobacco and lumber flow back to England. The rhythm is steady, a back and forth tide of trade. In the Caribbean, the story of sugar grows heavier. Plantations expand, the mills turning day and night, producing sweet crystals that fill the teacups of English households. Yet the labour is relentless, carried on the backs of enslaved men and women brought across the ocean in chains. Picture the endless rows of sugarcane swaying in the sun, beautiful and terrible at once. The hum of empire here is not soft. It is sharp, built upon suffering, even as its sweetness fills parlours and tea tables back home. And then, far across the sea, the East India Company plants itself more firmly in India. Forts and trading posts rise on the coasts, Madras, Bombay, Calcutta. Picture their walls of stone, cannons pointed outward, warehouses filled with cloth, spices and tea. English merchants walk shaded verandas, writing letters home, while Indian craftsmen weave textiles of dazzling beauty, their patterns so fine they catch the light like water. These fabrics, calicos and muslins fill English wardrobes, changing fashion itself. Isn't it curious how the empire crept into daily life not just through politics, but through the very fabric people wore? At home, the flavour of empire changes meals. Tea begins to grow in popularity, though still expensive, still reserved for the wealthier classes. Cups of hot, fragrant liquid sipped slowly by firelight, an exotic comfort that will, in time, become an English ritual. Sugar sweetens it, porcelain cups imported from China hold it, and conversation drifts around it. The empire is now not just abroad, it is on the tongue, in the cup, in the rhythm of daily life. But the seas are not peaceful. Rivalry with the Dutch and the French crackles in the air. Naval battles break out, sails filled with gun smoke and cannon fire echoing across the waves. Yet even in conflict, the empire grows. Islands change hands, forts are taken, treaties signed. Each victory plants another flag, each loss teaches another lesson. Step softly now into the streets of London again. The taverns glow with lamplight, their benches crowded with sailors. They eat meat pies steaming with gravy, drink ale from heavy mugs, and tell stories of distant lands. Their voices rise with excitement, but also with exhaustion. For the empire, though vast in promise, is still carried on human shoulders. Tired, calloused, weathered by sea and work. Isn't it soothing to imagine how ordinary life and extraordinary history walked side by side? A mother in London baking bread while across the sea, soldiers patrol a fort in India. A child in Boston playing with marbles while in Jamaica, sugar is cut beneath the hot sun. The empire is both far away and very close, woven into daily lives like threads in a vast unfolding tapestry. And so, as this century closes, England has become something more. No longer just an island nation, but a power with roots stretching across oceans. The story of empire is still only beginning, yet already its flavour is strong, sweet and bitter all at once. Let the hum of ships and the crackle of tavern fire soothe you as we drift forward into the next century, where the empire will grow larger still. The year is now the early 1700s, and the empire begins to take a clearer shape. The sails of Britain stretch across more oceans than ever before. The hum of trade, the clash of rivalry, and the weight of ambition all weave together, steady as the tide. Picture London at this moment, its docks crowded with ships arriving from every corner of the world. Barrels of sugar, tea, rum and tobacco roll down gangplanks. The air is filled with a medley of scents. The sharpness of spices, the sweetness of molasses, the salt of the sea. Merchants in powdered wigs haggle, scribbling numbers into ledgers by candlelight. The city itself feels alive with the beat of empire. Across the Atlantic, the colonies in North America are no longer fragile outposts but thriving settlements. Boston's streets echo with the clop of horses, Philadelphia hums with print shops and taverns, and Charleston bustles with plantations and markets. Families eat cornbread baked golden, drink cider pressed from orchards, and fill their tables with dishes that blend English traditions with New World abundance. Isn't it gentle to think of a Sunday table where roast meat sits beside pumpkins and corn pudding, flavours of two worlds meeting in one meal? Further south, in the Caribbean, sugar remains king. Plantations expand, their mills pounding day and night. Ships leave constantly, heavy with sacks of sugar and barrels of rum, the sweet products of bitter labour. Enslaved Africans, forced across the ocean, toil in the heat, their songs soft against the roar of machinery. The sweetness in English cups carries with it this hidden sorrow, a reminder that empire's glow is always shadowed. Far away in India, the East India Company continues to spread its reach. Forts grow into towns, warehouses expand, and soldiers guard the gates. Cotton, silk, spices and tea flow steadily into Britain. Imagine a drawing room in London, where ladies sip tea poured into delicate cups, their gowns made of Indian muslin, The fabric is so fine it almost vanishes against the skin, light as air, and yet behind its beauty lies the hum of looms thousands of miles away. At sea, Britain's navy grows stronger. Ships of the line, tall and majestic, patrol the waters. Cannons line their decks, sails stretch high, and their crews work tirelessly to keep them moving. Rivalries with France and Spain simmer constantly, each naval battle sending ripples across oceans. Picture the thunder of cannon fire, the smell of smoke, the crash of waves against hulls. Yet, in the quiet after, only the soft lap of the sea remains, as if the ocean itself sighs at human ambition. Back at home, food reflects the empire's growing reach. Tea grows more popular, sugar more common, spices more familiar. Even in humble cottages, gingerbread and puddings flavoured with nutmeg and cinnamon appear on tables. Children lick sweet treacle from spoons, their eyes wide with delight. Isn't it soothing to think of how distant lands could touch the quiet comfort of an English hearth? And then comes Scotland's union with England in 1707, creating Great Britain. Picture a parchment signed, seals pressed into wax, and a new identity formed. The empire now carries a larger name, a wider ambition. Ships from Glasgow and Edinburgh join those from London and Bristol, their sails filled with the same winds that carry the nation further outward. The century ahead will bring wars and treaties, victories and losses, yet in this moment, the empire feels steady, growing inevitable. The creak of ships, the laughter in taverns, the clink of teacups, all are part of the same story, threads woven into a vast and spreading cloth. As the lanterns dim in London, the docks quiet for the night, and the city rests in its ambition. The Thames laps gently at the wharves, whispering softly as it carries the empire's dreams out to sea. And we too drift onward, letting the rhythm of waves guide us into the next chapter of this unfolding story. The 18th century moves forward, and the empire grows restless, its sails stretched across nearly every horizon. Britain now feels less like a distant island, and more like the centre of a web, its threads running outward to colonies, ports, and trading posts around the world. Picture a London coffeehouse in the 1720s. The air is thick with smoke from pipes, the murmur of conversation, the scrape of quills against paper. Merchants gather here, maps spread across tables, cups of coffee steaming beside them. They whisper of ships bound for Jamaica, India, and Africa. Ideas flow as quickly as the drinks, coffee, chocolate, and tea, all products of empire, all symbols of its reach. Isn't it gentle to think of such rooms, filled with the hum of voices, each sip carrying the flavour of distant lands? In North America, the colonies continue to expand. Settlers push westward, clearing forests, planting fields of wheat, corn, and tobacco. Towns grow livelier, taverns echo with laughter, and markets brim with produce. Families sit down to hearty meals, cornbread, salted pork, beans stewed slowly, pies filled with apples or berries. The flavours of England mingle with the abundance of the New World, creating something new, something uniquely colonial. Meanwhile, in the Caribbean, sugar still reigns supreme. Ships come and go constantly, their holds heavy with molasses and rum. Imagine a barrel rolled down the dock, the sweet, sharp scent spilling into the air. Rum flows into taverns in London and Boston alike, fueling both merriment and mischief. Yet the sweetness is shadowed by the cruelty of slavery, the silent backbone of these riches. The contrast between the laughter in a tavern and the cries in a cane field shows how empire was always built on both delight and pain. Further east, the East India Company tightens its grip. Forts grow busier, warehouses swell with goods, and British influence begins to extend beyond trade into politics. Indian rulers strike alliances, resist, or negotiate, yet the presence of Britain grows heavier each year. Spices, tea, and textiles flow endlessly toward English shores, changing not only diets but wardrobes, drawing rooms, and even architecture. At sea, the Royal Navy becomes the Empire's shield and sword. Ships of the line patrol the Atlantic, their sails vast, their hulls bristling with cannons. Battles with the French and Spanish flicker across the oceans, each victory adding strength to Britain's name. Sailors eat salted beef and hard biscuits, their meals plain and tough, but their spirits buoyed by the sense of defending something larger than themselves. At home, ordinary families feel the empire in their kitchens. Tea grows cheaper, sugar more common. Even in cottages, evening meals end with a sweet pudding or treacle spread on bread. Children nibble ginger biscuits, their crumbs scattering across wooden floors. Isn't it soothing to picture such simple joys, where the vastness of empire arrives not as cannons or treaties, but as sweetness on a spoon? The empire, however, is not without friction. Colonists grumble about taxes, merchants argue over monopolies, and rival nations press constantly against Britain's growing power. Yet through it all, the hum of trade, the creak of ships, and the chatter of taverns continue steadily. The empire grows not in leaps but in steady tides, each wave carrying it further outward. Step outside into a London evening. The streets are lit by flickering oil lamps, their glow reflected on wet cobblestones. Vendors call out, selling pies and roasted chestnuts. The air is filled with scents, roasting meat, ale, sugar. Somewhere a fiddler plays, his tune drifting through the night. It is a city alive with empire, even if many who walk its streets cannot yet see the vastness of what their island has become. And so, the 18th century continues, the empire weaving itself tighter across oceans. Each ship that leaves carries more than goods, it carries a piece of Britain outward and brings back a piece of the world in return. As the night deepens, lanterns dim, and the city quiets. The Thames flows steadily past, its waters carrying whispers of distant lands, and we drift with it, onward, into the next chapter of this long and winding story. The middle of the 1700s arrives, and with it the empire grows louder, more ambitious, and more complex. Wars rage in Europe and spill across the seas, drawing colonies into their tide. Trade swells, fortunes rise, and tensions simmer. The British Empire is no longer a scattered collection of posts, it is becoming a global force. Picture the bustling harbour of Boston around 1750. Ships line the docks, their sails furled, their decks heavy with cargo. Barrels of tobacco, lumber, and salted fish await shipment, while crates of tea and manufactured goods arrive from Britain. The streets echo with the chatter of merchants, the creak of wagon wheels, the calls of sailors. Families sit at wooden tables eating chowders thick with clams and corn, drinking cider pressed fresh from apples. The colonies are thriving, yet beneath the hum of prosperity, a murmur of discontent begins to stir. Further south, Charleston bustles with rice and indigo plantations. The air is humid, heavy with the scent of earth and marsh, the rhythm of labour carried on enslaved shoulders. Indigo dyes stained fabrics deep blue, while rice fills ships bound for Europe. The wealth here is undeniable, but it rests upon foundations of suffering. Isn't it sobering to picture the contrast? A grand planter's supper of roasted duck and rice pudding, while just outside fields stretch endless with toil. Across the Caribbean, the sweetness of sugar continues to dominate. Plantations hum with constant activity, mills grinding day and night. Rum flows steadily into barrels, shipped north and east, fueling trade routes that circle the Atlantic. In London taverns, sailors sip rum mixed with lime, laughing between songs, never fully knowing the price of the sweetness in their mugs. Meanwhile, the East India Company's presence in India deepens. Battles are fought not only with rival European powers but with local rulers as well. In 1757, the Battle of Plassey tilts the balance, giving Britain enormous influence in Bengal. Imagine the heat of that battlefield, the smoke curling above rice padders, the clash of muskets and cannons. Out of that moment grows something immense, the foundation of the British dominion in India. Back at home, the empire's flavours seep further into kitchens. Tea has become a daily ritual, its steam curling from cups morning and night. Sugar, now more affordable, sweetens porridge and puddings. Curries, faint echoes of Indian kitchens, appear in English cookbooks. Even in quiet cottages, the empire is present, in the sweetness of jam, the fragrance of tea, the fabrics hung by the hearth. Yet the seas are still restless. The 7 Years' War, beginning in 1756, stretches across continents. North America, the Caribbean, Africa, India. Britain and France clash repeatedly, their navies thundering across oceans, their armies marching through forests and fields. In the colonies, settlers fight alongside red-coated soldiers, their meals reduced to salted meat and hard bread carried in packs. The war is brutal, costly, but by its end in 1763, Britain emerges with vast new territories: Canada from France, new dominance in India, and greater presence in the Caribbean. Step into a London street in the 1760s, and the empire is everywhere. Tea shops glow with lamplight, their windows fogged with steam. Sweet shops sell lozenges and toffees made with Caribbean sugar. Fashion houses display fabrics dyed with indigo from Carolina, muslins from Bengal. Isn't it gentle to think how people sipping tea or tasting sweets live daily life unaware of the battles, treaties and toil that brought these flavours to their tables? The empire is vast now, yet its very size brings new challenges. Colonies grumble about taxes, merchants argue over monopolies, and whispers of unrest begin to circle. The story of the British Empire is no longer only one of growth, it is also one of strain. As the 18th century moves toward its second half, the stage is set for conflict, change and revolution. But for tonight, let us rest in the image of a quiet evening. A family gathered around a hearth, sipping tea, nibbling on bread spread with jam, the glow of fire soft against the walls. The world outside may shift and clash, but inside comfort hums steady, carrying them gently through the night. And so we drift onward into the next chapter of Empire's story. The 1770s arrive, and with them, the hum of discontent grows louder across the Atlantic. The colonies in North America, once proud outposts of Britain, now begin to grumble more openly. Taxes, trade restrictions, and the feeling of being ruled from afar stir restless voices. Yet for a moment let us step softly into their kitchens and streets and taste life in these years before revolution fully erupts. Picture a Boston tavern on a winter's night. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, ale and roasted meat. Men gather around heavy wooden tables, their voices rising in debate. On the table sit mugs of cider, bowls of chowder thick with clams, and plates of brown bread. Outside, the harbour lies still, yet soon it will be filled with crates of tea that will not be sipped, but thrown into the water in protest. Isn't it curious how a simple drink, sweetened with sugar, could become the spark for rebellion? In Philadelphia, families gather for suppers of stewed beef, corn pudding and apple pie. The meals are hearty, filling and familiar. Yet at the same tables, pamphlets are read aloud, words of independence spoken softly at first, then louder as months pass. The empire's flavours, tea from China, sugar from the Caribbean, are still on their plates, even as its presence is questioned in their minds. Back in London, the news arrives slowly, carried by ships that creak across the Atlantic. In the coffee houses, merchants sip their drinks, brows furrowed as they read of unrest. Some shake their heads, others mutter in anger, but all feel the strain. The empire, once a steady tide of expansion, now feels the tug of resistance. The American Revolution begins in 1775. Imagine the sound of muskets in the distance, the thud of drums, the sharp crack of gunpowder. Red-coated soldiers march in lines, their rations of salted beef and hard biscuits packed in their satchels. Colonial militias gather, eating what they can: cornbread, smoked meat, beans cooked over open fires. The war is as much about hunger and endurance as it is about battles. Meanwhile, in the Caribbean, the plantations continue their rhythm. Sugar, rum, and molasses flow into ships, even as war disrupts trade routes. In India, the East India Company expands its power further, stepping quietly from trade into governance. Isn't it striking how even as Britain loses one set of colonies, its reach deepens elsewhere? The empire, like the tide, ebbs in one place only to surge in another. By 1783, the war ends, and Britain recognises the independence of the United States. Picture the signing of the Treaty of Paris, quills scratching on parchment, the ink marking both loss and change. For Britain, it is a moment of reckoning. An empire that seemed unstoppable has been challenged and reshaped. Yet, even in loss, the empire endures. Canada remains loyal, the Caribbean still hums with sugar, and India grows ever more central. The taste of tea still lingers in English cups, sweetened with sugar from Jamaica. The empire is wounded but not broken. Back in English homes, families sit for supper. Roasted mutton, potatoes, puddings flavoured with nutmeg. The children sip milk, the adults sip tea, and the conversation turns to news of America. Some sigh, some shrug, some wonder what comes next. And outside, the Thames flows steadily on, carrying ships towards horizons where the empire will still grow. Isn't it gentle to pause here, to see how history can both shift and remain steady? The loss of America is a great turning, yet life continues. Meals are eaten, fires are stoked, ships still sail. The story of empire is not an ending, but a redirection. As the 18th century moves toward its close, the British Empire looks eastward, toward India, toward new ambitions, and we too drift with it softly into the next chapter. The 1780s and 1790s unfold, and though Britain has lost its American colonies, the empire does not falter. Instead, it shifts its gaze more firmly eastward, toward India, and southward, toward new horizons. The story of empire is like a river. It bends, it changes course, yet it flows steadily onward. Picture Calcutta in the late 1700s. The city hums with the activity of the East India Company. Warehouses brim with textiles, fine muslins soft as air, silks that shimmer in the light, cotton dyed in brilliant hues. Ships stand ready to carry these treasures back to Britain. On the streets, the mingling of cultures is visible. British officials in powdered wigs, Indian merchants in turbans, children darting between stalls selling spices, sweets and tea. The air smells of cardamom, curry and smoke from cooking fires. Isn't it vivid to imagine such a place, where the empire lived not in books but in the daily rhythm of trade and life? At home in England, these imports reshape daily habits. Tea is no longer a luxury, it becomes a staple. Families, rich and poor alike, gather in the evenings with teapots steaming, cups clinking softly against saucers. Sugar cubes melt into the amber liquid, a sweetness carried all the way from Caribbean plantations. Biscuits and cakes are served alongside, flavoured with nutmeg or cinnamon. The empire is now present in every sip, every bite, every crumb. But the world is restless. In France, revolution brews. Across Europe, wars erupt and Britain finds itself once more at the heart of conflict. The Napoleonic Wars begin to stir, bringing with them decades of strife. Naval battles dominate, and Britain's Royal Navy becomes the shield of the empire. Picture the deck of HMS Victory under Admiral Nelson. Cannons line the ship, ropes creak, the sea wind whips against faces hardened by salt and sun. Meals are simple: hardtack biscuits, salted beef, peas boiled until soft. Yet spirits remain high, for the sailors believe they carry not just themselves, but the pride of Britain into every battle. The thunder of Trafalgar in 1805 will echo as one of their greatest victories, but even before that, the Navy's presence ensures the Empire's lifeblood of trade flows steadily. In the Caribbean, sugar still dominates, its sweetness irresistible, its labour brutal. Ships of enslaved people continue to arrive, though voices in Britain begin to call for abolition. In parlours and chapels, men and women speak against slavery, their petitions spreading slowly but surely. By 1807, the slave trade will be abolished, but in these years the struggle still rises, like a storm building on the horizon. Meanwhile, far to the south, a new chapter begins. The voyages of Captain James Cook in the late 1700s bring Australia into Britain's view. In 1788, the first fleet arrives at Botany Bay carrying settlers and convicts alike. Imagine the strange sight of kangaroos bounding across fields, the unfamiliar calls of birds, the heat of a sun far harsher than England's. A penal colony is born, but it will grow into much more. Isn't it curious how empire often began with uncertainty, with hardship, and yet rooted itself deeply over time? Back in London, life carries on with the rhythm of empire. Streets bustle with carts of bread, pies, and roasted chestnuts. Taverns pour ale and rum, sweetened with molasses from Jamaica. Children nibble on treacle toffee, their hands sticky, their laughter echoing down alleys. Families gather for Sunday suppers, roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, and of course tea to end the meal. Even those who never leave their villages live lives touched by faraway lands. Isn't it gentle to think how vast events, wars, colonies, treaties, filtered quietly into ordinary evenings, into cups of tea, into the sweetness of dessert? The empire was both distant and close, grand and ordinary, thunderous in battle yet soft in the daily rituals of life. As the century closes, Britain stands firm, America lost, but India, the Caribbean, and Australia now central. The Royal Navy rules the seas, trade flourishes, and the hum of empire grows steadier. Yet new challenges wait with the dawn of the 19th century, when wars, reform, and industry will shape it further. And so, as the lanterns dim across London and Calcutta alike, let us drift onward, following the tide into the next century of empire's unfolding story. The 19th century dawns, and with it the British Empire enters a new phase. The sails of its ships are stronger, its trade wider, its reach stretching farther than ever before. Yet the century will bring not only expansion but also transformation, driven by war, industry, and reform. Picture Britain in the early 1800s. The streets of London are alive with the rumble of carts, the clang of iron, the smell of coal fires drifting into the foggy air. Factories begin to hum, their machines turning with relentless rhythm. The Industrial Revolution is reshaping the nation, and with it the empire's appetite grows larger still. Cotton, coal, iron, and steam all become the tools of empire's strength. But first, war dominates the stage. The Napoleonic Wars rage across Europe. Britain, allied and opposed in turn, stands against Napoleon's ambition. At sea, the Royal Navy ensures that trade continues, blockading ports, guarding shipping lanes. Picture the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, Admiral Nelson at the helm. Cannons roar, smoke fills the air, the waves crash violently. Sailors eat hard biscuits and salted beef, their stomachs uneasy but their hearts steadfast. The victory secures Britain's mastery of the seas, a mastery that will carry the empire for a century to come. In India, the East India Company deepens its control. No longer just traders, the company's officials govern territories, collect taxes, and command armies. The streets of Calcutta and Bombay mix the sounds of English and Indian voices, the smells of curry and roasted meats drifting together. English families sip tea on verandas, their tables set with porcelain, while Indian bazaars outside brim with spices, fabrics, and voices. Isn't it vivid to imagine this mingling of cultures, uneven and uneasy, yet deeply intertwined? In the Caribbean, sugar continues to sweeten English tables, but voices for abolition grow stronger. In 1807, the slave trade is abolished by Britain. Picture the moment in Parliament. Quill scratching, votes cast, the chamber filled with a sense of history turning. Yet slavery itself remains in the colonies until 1833, when emancipation comes at last. Across the islands, men and women taste freedom, though hardship remains. Still, the sweetness of sugar now carries a different weight, a reminder of change long fought for. Meanwhile, in Australia, the colony at Botany Bay grows. Convicts farm the land, soldiers guard the settlements, and free settlers arrive seeking opportunity. The land is vast, strange, and challenging, but slowly towns begin to rise. Sheep are introduced, their wool soon flowing back to Britain, feeding the mills of Manchester and Leeds. Isn't it curious how something as simple as wool could tie a distant land to the heart of an empire? At home, food reflects the changing times. Tea is now a daily staple for all classes, sugar spooned into every cup. Bread remains central, but industrial mills produce it faster than ever. In working-class homes, meals are simple: stews of potatoes and cabbage, slices of bread with butter, puddings made with treacle or jam. In wealthier households, dinners grow elaborate. Roast meats, fish, pies and desserts flavoured with spices brought from distant lands. The empire sits quietly on every table, whether in a humble cottage or a grand townhouse. Children play in the streets, nibbling on toffees and boiled sweets wrapped in paper. Vendors sell hot pies and roasted chestnuts on corners, their calls echoing through the fog. The taste of empire is everywhere, woven into ordinary life. Isn't it soothing to think of how the grand and the everyday moved side by side? Naval battles shaping nations, while at the same time families in cottages sipped tea, sweetened with sugar from distant shores. As the century unfolds, Britain will face revolts, reforms and expansion like never before. Yet in these early decades, its power feels firm, its navy unchallenged, its industry rising. The empire is not yet at its peak, but the path toward it is clear. And so, as lamps are lit in London and Calcutta alike, as families sip their evening tea, we drift softly onward into the heart of the 19th century, where the empire will grow to heights never seen before. The 1820s and 1830s unfold, and the empire grows both outward and inward, reshaped not only by conquest, but by reform. Britain stands at a crossroads, its navy ruling the seas, its factories thundering at home, its colonies expanding. Yet the voices of change stir within, urging a softer, fairer empire. Picture London in the 1830s. The streets are crowded, the fog thick with smoke from coal. Horses clatter over cobblestones. Vendors cry out with their wares. Meat pies steaming in hand carts. Roasted chestnuts crackling in pans. Ribbons and fabrics hanging in stalls. In drawing rooms, ladies sip tea sweetened with sugar, while in working-class homes, families share loaves of bread, bowls of porridge and potatoes boiled simply, their skins cracking in the steam. Isn't it gentle to see how, despite the distance of colonies, the empire is tasted in every cup of tea, every spoonful of sugar? In 1833, a turning point arrives, the abolition of slavery across the British Empire. Picture the moment, the Chamber of Parliament hushed, pens scratching, words sealing the end of centuries of bondage. In the Caribbean, the news spreads, and the first dawn of freedom breaks across the islands. Formerly enslaved men and women step into fields now as free people. It is not an end to hardship. Wages are low, opportunities scarce. But it is a new beginning, and the sweetness of sugar no longer carries the same chains. Meanwhile, in India, the East India Company deepens its rule. Courts and laws are written, railways planned, and English schools open their doors. Families in England now dress their children in cotton woven in Bengal, while Indian cities begin to echo with English voices. At dinner tables in Calcutta, curry dishes mingle with roasted meats, a blending of flavours that reflects the entanglement of cultures. Isn't it vivid to imagine the smell of spice and roast drifting together in the same air? In Australia, colonies grow steadily. Sheep graze across wide fields, their wool flowing back to Britain's mills. Convicts build roads and farms, while free settlers arrive by the hundreds, seeking a new life. Meals here are hearty, damper bread baked in ashes, mutton roasted over fires, tea boiled black and strong. The empire takes root in the soil, in the taste of meals shared under stars far from Britain's fog. Back at home, industry reshapes the rhythm of life. Factories churn, railways stretch across the land, cities swell with workers. Families eat quickly between long hours, bread, cheese, stews of potatoes and cabbage. In wealthier homes, dinners grow elaborate. Soups, roasts, puddings, all served with ceremony. Yet whether simple or grand, tea flows at every table, carrying the empire's presence softly into every household. The navy, ever watchful, continues to guard the seas. Sailors live on salted beef, hard biscuits and grog, their meals plain but steady. They sing as they eat, their songs drifting across the waves, their voices part of the hum that keeps the empire's trade alive. Isn't it calming to see how the empire, vast and complex, always came down to such simple moments? A sailor eating hardtack under the stars, a child in London licking treacle from a spoon, a freedman in Jamaica tasting the first sweetness of sugar as his own. History as vast as oceans, yet grounded always in the small human details of daily life. The 1830s close with the empire larger, freer in some ways, heavier in others. Reform has begun, but challenges remain. The story continues, steady as the tide, carrying Britain toward its greatest century of expansion. And so, as lamps glow in London, as fires burn in Calcutta, as stars shine over Sydney, we drift onward, carried softly into the next chapter of empire's unfolding tale. The 1840s arrive, and the British Empire enters a decade of both promise and pain. The empire stretches wide, yet hunger and hardship strike even at home. Change, expansion and reform move side by side, their rhythm steady, like waves that both build and break upon the shore. Picture Ireland in the late 1840s. The potato blight spreads across fields, turning once rich crops into blackened waste. Families gather in cottages, their tables bare, their stomachs aching. The famine brings sorrow that ripples far beyond the island. Ships carry thousands away, emigrants bound for America, their hearts heavy, their pockets light. Isn't it sobering to think of an empire so vast, yet unable to shield its own from hunger? Back in England, industry hums louder. Railways stretch across the land, steam engines hiss and whistle, factories thrum with noise. Workers eat quickly, bread and cheese at midday, a bowl of stew at night, potatoes boiled soft in iron pots. The meals are plain, but they keep bodies moving through long hours of labour. In wealthier homes, the dinners are far more elaborate. Roasts carved neatly, puddings draped in custard, wines poured into crystal glasses. The contrasts of empire are everywhere, sharp yet steady. Abroad, Britain's hand grows heavier. In China, the opium wars erupt, fought not for land but for trade. Picture the clash of ships along the Pearl River, sails filled with gunsmoke, cannons thundering into the night. The Treaty of Nanking in 1842 cedes Hong Kong to Britain, a new jewel in its growing crown. In London drawing rooms, teacups clink against saucers, their contents sweetened with sugar, flavoured with leaves shipped across half the world. Isn't it strange how wars and treaties could be tasted softly in something as ordinary as an evening cup of tea? In India, the East India Company expands its rule further. Railways are laid, telegraphs strung, British officers dine on curries served beside roast beef. Indian soldiers drill in ranks, their rations of rice and lentils steady as ever. The mingling of flavours, of routines, creates a rhythm uniquely colonial, uneasy yet enduring. Meanwhile, in New Zealand, treaties are signed and contested between the British Crown and the Maori people. Settlers arrive with hopes of farms and new lives. Their meals simple, bread baked over campfires, stews of lamb and cabbage, tea boiled black in tin pots. The empire grows not only in size but in diversity, its meals, languages and landscapes blending unevenly into its fabric. Back at home, the Great Exhibition of 1851 is being imagined. The Crystal Palace will soon rise, its glass walls filled with treasures from across the empire. Fabrics, spices, machines and jewels, displays of power and abundance. Visitors will wander its halls, tasting sweets, marvelling at inventions, listening to music that carries echoes from colonies far away. For now, though, in the 1840s, the seeds of that showcase are just being planted, quietly, steadily. Step into a London evening. The streets are damp, the lamps glow faintly through the fog. A vendor sells meat pies from a cart, their crusts golden, their fillings steaming with gravy. Children share sticky toffee, their laughter ringing against brick walls. A sailor passes by, his step uneven, his pocket heavy with a coin earned from voyages that stretched across oceans. The empire hums around them, grand in scale, quiet in detail. Isn't it calming to see how history's thunder softened into daily life? A famine in Ireland, a war in China, treaties in New Zealand, yet in London, a family still gathers around bread and soup. A child still drifts to sleep with sugar on his lips. The empire is vast, yet always lived in small, ordinary moments. As the 1840s close, the empire is larger, heavier, and more complex than before. Shadows of hunger and conflict remain, but the path ahead still promises expansion. And so, as the lamps dim in cottages and palaces alike, we drift softly onward into the 1850s, where the empire's rhythm will beat louder still. The 1850s open with a mix of triumph and turmoil, a decade where the empire shines brightly but also reveals its deep tensions. Britain is now recognised as the world's leading power, its navy unrivalled, its factories thundering, its colonies expanding. Yet beneath this glow lie conflicts and challenges that will shape the empire's path. Picture London in 1851, where the Great Exhibition opens in Hyde Park. The Crystal Palace rises like a cathedral of glass, glittering beneath the sun. Inside, treasures of the empire are displayed. Silks from India, sugar from the Caribbean, wool from Australia, tea from Ceylon, and machines that whir with the hum of the Industrial Revolution. Visitors stroll slowly, their voices hushed with wonder, nibbling on sweets wrapped in paper or sipping lemonade served in delicate glasses. Isn't it soothing to imagine the awe of such a place, where the vastness of empire was gathered under one shimmering roof? But even as London marvels, conflict brews abroad. In India, resentment grows against the East India Company's heavy hand. Soldiers grumble, farmers struggle, and whispers of rebellion pass from village to village. In 1857, the Indian rebellion erupts. Picture the chaos, the clash of swords and muskets, the cries of soldiers and civilians alike. Meals are scarce, soldiers on both sides surviving on rice, chapatis, or salted rations carried in pouches. The rebellion shakes the empire deeply, and when it ends, the British Crown takes direct control of India, marking the birth of the Raj. Meanwhile, in the Crimean War, 1853-1856, Britain joins allies against Russia. Soldiers march in frozen fields, their red coats stark against the snow. Rations are meagre, hardtack, salted meat, tea brewed bitter in tin mugs. Nurses like Florence Nightingale bring light into the darkness, carrying trays of broth and bread to the wounded. The war is brutal, but it reveals the strength of Britain's reach and the importance of reform. Back home, daily life continues its rhythm. Working families eat stews of cabbage and potatoes, thick slices of bread spread with dripping. Children snack on penny sweets, licorice, humbugs, toffee, sold from jars in shop windows. In wealthier homes, dinners grow more elaborate. Turtle soup, roast beef, puddings layered with cream and sugar. Yet whether plain or grand, every meal ends the same, with a cup of tea, steam curling upward like a soft reminder of the empire's presence. In Australia, gold is discovered in the 1850s, and the colonies surge with energy. Ships arrive with eager settlers, their meals simple but hearty, mutton stews, damper bread baked on campfires, billy tea brewed strong. Camps ring with laughter, songs and the clatter of pans, the smell of roasting meat drifting through the evening air. For many, it is a taste of hope, a bite of opportunity. In Africa, the empire begins to probe deeper inland, though slowly. Missionaries and traders travel upriver, sharing meals of maize, beans, or roasted game with local communities. The empire's gaze stretches wide, curious and ambitious, though the full weight of its expansion there is still to come. Step softly now into an English evening of the 1850s. The fog drifts low over cobbled streets, lamps glowing dimly. A vendor sells hot pies, their crusts breaking to reveal gravy and meat. Families gather around fires, children sipping milk, parents drinking tea with bread and butter. Newspapers rustle as readers scan headlines of rebellion in India, war in Crimea, gold in Australia. Yet the hearth remains warm, the table steady, the meals grounding. Isn't it calming to see how, in every corner of the empire, life centered around the same rhythm, food shared, tea poured, voices murmuring in the glow of fire or lamp? Whether in a London parlour, a Calcutta veranda, or a Goldfield camp in Victoria, the taste of the empire was carried in simple human ways. As the 1850s close, Britain's empire feels vast, secure, yet more complicated than ever. Triumph and turmoil, sweetness and sorrow, all woven into its fabric. And so, as the lamps dim in London and Calcutta, as fires flicker in Sydney and Sevastopol, we drift onward into the next chapter, where the empire will rise higher still, yet carry heavier shadows with it. The 1860s arrive, and the British Empire stands taller than ever before. Its navy commands the seas, its colonies stretch across continents, its industry feeds both its own people and its vast dominions abroad. Yet, as always, the story is not only of grandeur, but of daily life, of meals shared, journeys taken, and voices rising softly in the background of history. Picture London at this moment. Railways whistle into the city, their steam clouds rising into the smoky air. Markets bustle with goods from across the empire. pineapples from the Caribbean, tea from India and Ceylon, wool from Australia, and spices from the East. A mother buys a loaf of bread, a wedge of cheese and a scoop of sugar, her children tugging at her skirts. Down another street, a gentleman in a top hat sips tea sweetened with honey, nibbling on a slice of sponge cake layered with jam. Isn't it gentle to think how the vast oceans and colonies all came together in something so simple as an afternoon snack? In India, the Raj is now firmly established. British officials live in grand bungalows, dining on meals that blend traditions. Roast lamb beside rice pilau, puddings flavoured with cardamom, cups of tea poured in porcelain cups. Outside, Indian bazaars overflow with colours and scents. Curries bubbling, sweets sold in trays, fruits piled high in baskets. The empire feels both imposing and intimate here, shaping daily lives in countless ways. In Africa, explorers pushed deeper inland during the 1860s. The journeys are harsh, marked by heat, hunger, and exhaustion. Meals are simple, maize porridge, beans, or dried meat carried in packs, yet each step charts rivers and forests unknown to the British before, expanding the map, expanding ambition. Missions are built, trading posts established, and slowly Britain's presence grows. Across the seas in New Zealand, conflict flares as settlers and the Maori people clash in the New Zealand wars. Soldiers march through forests, their rations plain, hardtack, tea, salted beef. Maori fighters too endure the same forests, their meals drawn from the land itself, root crops, fish, and wild herbs. The empire presses forward, but not without resistance, not without struggle. Back in Britain, the daily table continues its steady rhythm. Working families eat bread and dripping, bowls of stew or porridge sweetened with treacle. Street vendors sell pies with flaky crusts, roasted potatoes wrapped in paper, penny sweets shining in jars. Children play in narrow alleys, their hands sticky with toffee, their laughter softening the noise of factories and trains. In wealthier homes, dinners are elaborate affairs. Soup served first, then roast meats with potatoes and greens, followed by puddings heavy with cream, all ending with tea or coffee. Newspapers rustle between courses, reporting on wars in New Zealand, debates in Parliament, and the progress of empire. Yet in the glow of candlelight, the empire feels distant, softened into the comfort of food and company. The 1860s also bring sorrow. In Jamaica, the Morant Bay Rebellion of 1865 rises against injustice and poverty. It is met with harsh repression, leaving deep scars. The sweetness of sugar still flows into Britain, but its taste is shadowed by the pain of those who toil for it. Isn't it sobering to think how joy and sorrow always travelled side by side in the story of empire? Step softly now into an evening in 1860s London. The fog curls low over the Thames, lamps glow along the bridges, and the sound of boots echoes on the wet cobbles. A pie seller calls out softly, her cart steaming in the cold. Families sit in parlours sipping tea as the fire crackles. Children doze on laps, the hum of the empire far away yet always present in the sugar that sweetens their milk. The empire, vast and unstoppable, feels steady in these years. Its ships sail constantly, its goods fill markets, its stories fill newspapers. Yet the world it touches is restless, resisting, reshaping, enduring. And so, as the 1860s close, the empire prepares to step into its greatest century of heightened challenge. For tonight, though, let us rest in the image of a quiet supper by the fire, a warm cup of tea in hand, the world outside softened into fog and lamplight. The 1870s open with the British Empire at a steady stride. The world it touches grows broader, its influence deeper, and yet the rhythm of life remains both ordinary and grand. Industry at home, expansion abroad, and the hum of daily meals all weave together into the fabric of this decade. Picture London's docks in the early 1870s. Ships crowd the Thames, their masts rising like forests, their holds filled with treasures of empire. Tea from Ceylon, cotton from India, wool from Australia, sugar from the Caribbean, and new fruits like bananas beginning to appear. Dock workers haul crates, merchants tally numbers in ledgers, and the smell of salt, tar and spice fills the air. In nearby taverns, men eat bowls of stew, tear loaves of bread and sip mugs of ale, their laughter rising above the din. In India, railways stretch further into the countryside. Trains whistle as they cut across plains carrying cotton, spices and passengers. British officers sip tea in stations, while Indian families eat chapatis and lentils as they wait for trains that link villages to cities. The Raj grows more organised, more visible, shaping both landscapes and lives. Isn't it gentle to imagine the sound of a train's whistle blending with the call of vendors selling sweet jalebis or spice snacks on platforms? In Africa, Britain begins to turn its gaze more firmly toward expansion. Explorers map rivers, traders establish posts, missionaries build schools. Meals in these faraway outposts are simple: maize porridge, roasted goat, or bread baked in iron pots. The Empire's presence here is only beginning to deepen, yet its ambition hums quietly in the background. Back in Britain, food reflects the Empire's reach. Curry recipes appear in cookbooks, adapted with British tastes: mild spices, cream, and rice. Tea is consumed morning and evening, biscuits stacked neatly in tins. Working-class families rely on bread, potatoes, and porridge, stretching every penny to fill hungry mouths. Children nibble penny sweets, sticks of peppermint, boiled humbugs, or toffee pulled into golden strands. The flavours of the Empire are everywhere, softened into daily routine. Across the seas in Australia and New Zealand, the colonies grow stronger. Sheep farms spread, sending wool back to Britain's factories. Settlers eat hearty meals: roast lamb, damper bread, and strong black tea. In New Zealand, tensions with the Maori continue, yet settlers persist, carving farms from land that carries stories far older than empire. The Empire's navy still guards its lifelines. Sailors eat salted pork, dried peas, and hard biscuits softened in broth. On deck, they sing shanties, their voices steady as the tide. In their bowls, the meals are plain, but their work keeps the Empire's goods flowing, the tea steaming in parlours, the sugar sweetening puddings in cottages. The 1870s also bring moments of pride. In 1877, Queen Victoria is proclaimed Empress of India, a title that formalises what many already feel, that India is the jewel of the Empire. Picture the ceremony, the grandeur of banners and speeches, the taste of feasts prepared in both English and Indian styles. Roast meats beside spiced rice, puddings beside trays of sweets. The blending of flavours mirrors the blending of power. Step softly now into an English evening of the 1870s. A family gathers in a small parlour, their supper simple: bread, cheese, and a pot of tea. Children doze after finishing bowls of porridge sweetened with jam. Outside, the street glows faintly with gas lamps, and the distant whistle of a train drifts through the fog. Far away, ships cross oceans, armies patrol colonies, merchants haggle in markets. Yet here, the warmth of tea and fire steadies life into calm. Isn't it soothing to think of how the Empire, vast and thunderous, always returned to these quiet moments? A loaf of bread shared, a spoon of sugar stirred into tea, a child smiling with sticky toffee on their lips. As the 1870s close, the Empire feels unshakable, its power vast, its presence constant. Yet in the decades to come, its ambitions will stretch even further, reshaping the world in ways both bright and heavy. And so, we drift onward, carried softly into the 1880s, where the Empire will reach for its greatest heights. The 1880s arrive, and the British Empire stands at its greatest strength. It stretches across continents, a patchwork of colonies, dominions, and protectorates, its navy guarding seas that connect every shore. Yet with this height of power also comes the weight of ambition, rivalry, and responsibility. Picture London in these years. Gas lamps glow along foggy streets, trains whistle into stations, and markets overflow with goods from across the world. A grocer arranges oranges from the Mediterranean, bananas from the Caribbean, and tea from India. Children press their faces to the glass of sweet shops, pointing to humbugs, peppermints, and treacle toffee stacked in jars. A mother buys bread and sugar, while in wealthier homes, cooks prepare elaborate dinners. Soups, roasts, puddings, each flavoured with something touched by empire. Isn't it calming to think how, for most people, the vast machinery of empire arrived as nothing more than a warm meal on the table? Across the seas, Africa becomes a stage of rapid change. The scramble for Africa begins in the 1880s, as European powers carve the continent into colonies. Britain claims territories from Egypt to South Africa, its flags rising quickly. In Cairo, families sip tea along the Nile, mixing local flavours with imported goods. In Cape Town, settlers eat stews of lamb and maize, while British officers dine on roasts shipped from home. The empire grows not only through treaties and battles, but through the daily rhythm of meals shared under new flags. In India, railways expand, connecting cities to distant villages. Trains carry cotton, spices and tea bound for Britain, but also carry people, workers, merchants, families, moving faster than ever before. In railway compartments, meals are simple. Chapatis wrapped in cloth, spiced lentils eaten with fingers, sweet mangoes shared among travellers. British passengers sip tea poured from kettles, the scent of cardamom drifting through the air. Isn't it vivid to picture how the clatter of wheels on rails blended cultures one station at a time? In Australia, sheep farming thrives, wool pouring into Britain's mills. Settlers sit by campfires, eating damper bread baked in ashes, drinking billy tea boiled strong. In New Zealand, farmers grow wheat and raise cattle, while Maori traditions continue beside the colonial presence. Meals here are hearty, grounded in the land, yet tied firmly to Britain's factories and tables. Back at sea, the Royal Navy remains the Empire's lifeline. Sailors patrol distant waters, their rations of salted meat, biscuits and peas unchanged. Yet ships are modernising, ironclads replacing wooden hulls, steam engines humming alongside sails. On deck, sailors sing softly over bowls of stew, their voices carried across the waves like lullabies of empire. At home, daily meals carry steady comfort. Working families eat bread, potatoes and porridge, stretching every coin. Children nibble penny sweets, boiled candies wrapped in paper, sticks of licorice, or fudge sold in squares. In wealthier homes, dinners are grander with multiple courses, wines and desserts flavoured with exotic spices. Yet whether humble or rich, the empire is tasted in every cup of tea, every spoon of sugar. The 1880s also bring rivalry. Germany, France and other powers press against Britain's reach, their own empires rising. Newspapers in London report anxiously, their pages filled with maps and headlines. Yet in parlours and cottages, families read these stories over slices of bread and jam, their teacups steaming in their hands. The vast struggles of nations are softened into the comfort of daily routine. Step softly into an English evening of the 1880s. The streets glow with gaslight, fog drifting low. A pie seller calls out, his cart steaming with gravy and crust. Families gather in parlours, children finishing bowls of rice pudding sweetened with sugar, parents sipping tea as newspapers rustle. The empire hums in the background, vast and unstoppable, yet felt most gently in these small human rituals. Isn't it soothing to see how even at its height, the empire's grandeur always returned to the ordinary? The warmth of food, the comfort of fire, the calm of voices at the table? As the 1880s close, the British Empire feels unshakable, its power immense, its reach global. Yet the decades ahead will bring both triumph and strain as the 20th century approaches with challenges no empire can ignore. And so, we drift onward into the 1890s, where the empire will shine brightly but begin to sense the weight of the world pressing back. The 1890s arrive, and the empire shines with a brilliance that seems endless. From Canada to India, from Africa to Australia, the map glows with the red of Britain's dominion. The phrase, "the sun never sets on the British Empire," becomes more than just words. It feels like a truth. And yet, even in this grandeur, the empire is lived not only in politics and power, but in the small moments of daily life. Picture London in the 1890s, alive with bustle. The streets echo with the clatter of horse-drawn trams, the calls of vendors, the hum of markets. Tea shops glow with gaslight, their windows fogged with steam. Inside, customers sip tea poured from polished pots, nibbling on scones with clotted cream, or biscuits dunked gently into the amber liquid. Isn't it soothing to think of such calm scenes, where empire was tasted simply in the sweetness of sugar and the warmth of a cup. In Africa, Britain's presence deepens. Egypt, Sudan, and territories of southern Africa fall more firmly under British control. Soldiers march across deserts and veld, their meals plain, hardtack, dried meat, and tea brewed black in tin mugs. Settlers farm wheat and maize, cooking porridge and stews that feed growing communities. Yet, beneath the expansion, tension grows. Local peoples resist, their own meals of millet, maize, and roasted game grounding them in lands suddenly claimed by distant powers. In India, the Raj flourishes, railways spreading like veins across the land. Trains carry cotton, rice, and tea, but also carry passengers who share food from their homes. Chapatis, curries, sweets made with milk and sugar. British officers sip gin and tonic on verandas, their tables set with roasts and puddings. The mingling of flavours continues, spices meeting gravy, rice beside beef. Isn't it vivid to imagine these contrasts, where empire's presence was written in the very taste of a meal? In Australia, cities like Melbourne and Sydney grow quickly, their streets lined with shops, theatres and markets. Settlers enjoy hearty dinners of lamb, bread and vegetables, while miners in the outback eat damper bread, tea and whatever game they can hunt. Sheep still graze across wide fields, their wool feeding Britain's mills, tying distant lives together through simple fabrics worn every day. At sea, the Royal Navy patrols tirelessly. Ships now are more steel than wood, powered by coal-fired engines. Sailors eat rations of meat, biscuits and peas, still plain, but now accompanied by stronger coffee or cocoa. Their voices rise in song across the decks, steady as the hum of engines, steady as the tide that binds the empire together. Back home, food reflects the empire's height. Middle-class families gather for Sunday dinners of roast beef, potatoes, and Yorkshire pudding, followed by puddings rich with raisins and spices. Children enjoy penny sweets, peppermints, boiled candies, and fudge squares, while vendors sell fish and chips wrapped in paper on busy corners. Even the humblest suppers of bread and jam carry the taste of empire, sugar and flour reaching from fields thousands of miles away. The 1890s also bring spectacle. Queen Victoria celebrates her Diamond Jubilee in 1897, marking 60 years on the throne. Imagine the parades, the music of brass bands, the fluttering flags. Crowds fill the streets, cheering, waving, eating pies sold from carts, sipping lemonade in the summer heat. Across the empire, too, celebrations are held. Tea parties in schools, feasts in town halls, fireworks in colonial cities. The sense of empire is not just political, it is emotional, almost festive, woven into the rhythm of life. Step softly now into an evening of the 1890s. The lamps glow along quiet streets, trains rumble in the distance, and a family gathers in their parlour. A pot of tea steams on the table, slices of bread are buttered, and jam gleams red beneath the lamplight. The children share biscuits, their laughter soft against the hum of the city outside. Far away, ships sail, soldiers march, colonies grow. But here, the empire is nothing more complicated than comfort in a cup. Isn't it gentle to see how grandeur and intimacy walked hand in hand? An empire vast enough to stretch across the globe, yet lived most tenderly in quiet meals, small sweets, and simple rituals. As the 1890s close, the empire feels unshakable, its glow bright. But a new century waits just ahead, carrying both triumph and storms, and so we drift onward into the dawn of the 20th century, where the empire will shine at its height, but also begin to feel the first winds of change. The 1900s open with the British Empire standing at its very height, a quarter of the world's land, a quarter of its people, all under the red of Britain's flag. In every corner of the globe, the rhythms of daily life carry the quiet imprint of empire, from the tea in a cup to the cloth on one's back. Yet beneath this grandeur, the world begins to stir with change. Picture London on a bright morning in 1901. News spreads quickly through the streets. Queen Victoria has passed, and with her ends a reign of more than 60 years. Bells toll solemnly, shops shutter briefly, and families gather to talk softly over breakfast. Toast spread with marmalade, cups of tea sweetened with sugar, porridge steaming in bowls. Outside, the city continues to hum, yet the air carries a sense of turning, of one age closing and another beginning. In South Africa, the Boer War, 1899-1902, rages, marking the dawn of the century with conflict. British soldiers march through veld and scrub, eating tinned meat, hard biscuits, and tea boiled black over fires. Families at home read reports by lamplight, their own meals plain but steady. Bread, cheese, puddings flavoured with treacle. Isn't it striking how war and peace lived side by side, one on the veldt, the other in the warmth of a London parlour? In India, the Raj continues its steady hum. Railways carry goods and people across vast distances. Tea plantations flourish in Assam and Ceylon, and bazaars overflow with colour and sound. British families sip gin and tonic on verandas, while Indian families share chapatis, dal and sweets flavoured with cardamom. The mingling of flavours continues, a quiet mirror of empire itself. In Africa, the empire stretches further, claiming territories in East Africa and beyond. Missionaries set up schools, traders establish stations, and settlers farm the land. Meals are simple: maize porridge, beans, bread baked in tin ovens, yet they tie distant lands to Britain's kitchens, where sugar and cocoa become staples of daily treats. Children nibble on chocolate bars first produced in these years, sweet reminders of the far-off fields that supplied them. Back at home, the new century feels both modern and familiar. Gas lamps begin to give way to electric light. Trains whistle through countryside stations, carrying bread, milk, and butter into cities. Families gather for Sunday roasts, beef, potatoes, Yorkshire pudding, followed by desserts like sponge cakes or rice puddings sweetened with cinnamon. Working-class families keep meals simpler. Bread spread with dripping, bowls of cabbage and potatoes, porridge flavoured with treacle. Yet in every household the kettle whistles, tea poured steadily, sugar stirred softly, empire in a cup. The coronation of King Edward VII in 1902 brings celebration. Crowds gather in London, bunting fluttering, pies and lemonade sold from carts. Children wave flags, their hands sticky with toffee apples. In India and Africa too, parades are held, feasts arranged, tea parties set up in schools and town squares. The empire is both distant and immediate, celebrated in rituals as small as a sweet or as grand as a coronation. Isn't it calming to see how history, vast and complex, always softened into such human details? A soldier eating a hard biscuit beneath the African sky, a child in Manchester licking sugar from a spoon, a family in Calcutta sipping tea as dusk settles. Step softly now into a London evening in the early 1900s. The lamps glow electric now, brighter than before. A pie seller calls out, his cart steaming in the fog. Families sit together in parlours, newspapers rustling, tea poured, biscuits shared. Outside, the empire stretches across oceans. Inside, the warmth of supper and the glow of light bring peace. The new century has begun, bright and steady. The empire feels strong, yet the winds of change stir faintly in the distance. For now, though, let us rest in the comfort of tea, bread and fire, drifting gently onward into the next chapter of this unfolding tale. The 1910s open with both calm and storm in the air. The empire still stretches wide, yet the world itself begins to tremble toward conflict. For a moment, though, let us begin softly, in the quieter rhythms of daily life before the thunder of war. Picture London in 1910. King Edward VII has passed, and George V takes the throne. The streets are decorated with bunting for the coronation. Vendors sell pies, sweets and lemonade, while families line the streets, children on shoulders, waving small flags. At home, meals are shared in the same steady fashion. Porridge in the morning, bread and cheese at midday, roasts on Sunday with potatoes and pudding. Isn't it soothing to imagine how, even as history shifted, the taste of bread and tea remained unchanged? In India, the Raj moves firmly under the crown. Railways are busier than ever, carrying cotton, rice and tea. At stations, vendors sell spice snacks and sweets, while British officials sip tea in compartments, their trunks stacked with luggage. The mingling of flavours grows richer, curries on one table, puddings on another, tea steaming on both. Across Africa, Britain extends its reach further still. Settlers farm wheat and maize, their meals hearty but plain, stews, bread and tea brewed strong. In Egypt, Cairo bustles with British officials and merchants sipping coffee in shaded cafes, their meals blending Mediterranean flavours with British tastes. In South Africa, the mines grow, feeding Britain's industry with gold and diamonds, while families share suppers of maize porridge, roasted meats and vegetables from gardens planted in the dry soil. And then, in 1914, war arrives. The First World War breaks out, and the empire is drawn into a conflict unlike any before. From Canada, India, Australia, Africa, and beyond, soldiers march to Europe's battlefields. Imagine the trenches of the Western Front, mud thick under boots, the air heavy with smoke, the distant thunder of artillery. Soldiers eat tins of bully beef, hard biscuits, and tea brewed quickly over small fires. The meals are meagre, yet they sustain men who fight under skies filled with both rain and shells. Back at home, rationing begins. Families in Britain stretch meals carefully, bread slices thinner, sugar measured spoon by spoon, meat replaced by stews of beans and vegetables. Children still nibble on sweets when they can, toffees wrapped in paper, but even these grow rarer. Women queue at bakeries carrying baskets lined with cloth, hoping for loaves to carry home. Isn't it humbling to picture how the empire's abundance was tested by the hunger of war? In India, soldiers march in British uniforms, carrying rifles, eating lentils and chapatis in camp. In Australia and New Zealand, men gather for meals of bread, mutton and tea before shipping out. Across the empire, kitchens and camps hum with the same rhythm, meals simple but shared in the shadow of war. By 1918, the war ends. The empire has endured, but at heavy cost. Soldiers return home, weary, thin, their uniforms worn. Families gather to welcome them, setting tables with what they can, slices of bread, bowls of soup, cups of tea. Joy mixes with sorrow, pride with loss. Step softly now into a London evening in 1919. The lamps glow faintly, the fog curls low, and families sit quietly together. A pot of tea steams, bread is buttered, jam is spread. Children giggle as they share biscuits, parents smile faintly, the weight of years behind them. The empire remains vast, but the war has left its mark, a shadow across its glow. Isn't it gentle to see how, through war and peace alike, the daily rituals of meals carried people forward? Bread shared, tea poured, laughter rising even in hard times. As the 1910s close, the empire feels both strong and shaken. The decade ahead will bring recovery, change, and new challenges. For tonight, though, let us rest in the comfort of a warm supper and a quiet fire, drifting softly into the next chapter. The 1920s unfold, a decade of relief and recovery after the long shadow of the Great War. The empire still stretches wide, its red patches shining on maps in classrooms and parlours alike. Yet, within this glow, new rhythms emerge, of joy, of rebuilding, of quiet tension beneath the surface. Picture London in 1920. The city is weary but alive again. Trams clatter through streets. Vendors call out with pies and roasted chestnuts. Jazz begins to drift softly from dance halls. Families sit together in modest kitchens, eating bread dripping and bowls of soup. On Sundays, they gather for roasts, meat if they can afford it, potatoes, cabbage, and pudding to follow. Tea is poured steadily, cups steaming, sugar cubes clinking into glasses. Isn't it calming to see how, even after war, the old rituals held steady like anchors? Across the empire, life resumes its hum. In India, the call for independence grows louder. Gandhi leads marches, protests, and movements, yet daily life continues. Families eat rice and lentils, sweets made with milk and sugar shared at festivals, cups of tea brewed in small homes. British officers dine in clubs, their tables set with roasts, puddings, and gin. The mingling of flavours continues, though the balance between them grows tense. In Africa, Britain expands its hold, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, all parts of the empire's vast net. Settlers farm wheat and coffee, while local communities carry on traditions of maize, beans, and roasted meats. Missionaries teach in schools, their meals simple, bread, porridge, tea brewed black. The empire grows, but its presence feels heavy, a weight carried on shoulders both willing and unwilling. In Australia and New Zealand, the war's losses are deeply felt. Memorials rise, names carved into stone, yet life carries on. Families eat lamb roasts, damper bread, and billy tea boiled over campfires. In cities, fish and chips are wrapped in paper, eaten with fingers as laughter echoes through streets. Isn't it gentle to picture how comfort often came wrapped in paper, steaming in the cool air? Back in Britain, the 1920s brings small luxuries back. Bakeries sell sponge cakes, biscuits, and sweets in tins. Children delight in new candies, chocolate bars wrapped in foil, toffees in colourful paper. Adults sip stronger teas, and coffee begins to find its place in cafes. At night, cinemas glow with electric light, popcorn sold in paper bags, audiences laughing softly in the dark. The Empire also gathers to remember. In 1924, the Cenotaph in London becomes a place of solemn tribute. Families leaving flowers, children holding parents' hands. Afterward, many return home to kitchens where bread and butter wait, cups of tea ready to warm them. The rituals of food soften the weight of memory. Yet beneath the calm, the Empire trembles faintly. Calls for independence grow not only in India, but in Ireland as well. In 1922, the Irish Free State is born, a reminder that even at its height, the Empire could lose pieces of itself. Families in Dublin share meals of potatoes, bread and stews, their conversations filled with new beginnings. Step softly now into a London evening of the 1920s. Electric lights glow brighter than gas ever did. A vendor sells fish and chips, their paper greasy and warm. Children skip along, hands sticky with toffee. Families sit in parlours, radios humming with music, tea poured into cups, biscuits shared. Far away in India, Africa, Australia, the same hum of meals continues. Rice and lentils, maize porridge, lamb roasts, all tied, however unevenly, to Britain's table. Isn't it soothing to see how, even in a decade of change, the rhythm of food and family remained steady? The Empire lived in maps and politics, but also in jam spread on bread, in tea sipped slowly, in sweets unwrapped by children. As the 1920s close, the Empire feels vast still, but the winds of independence stir louder. The next decade will bring not only depression and hardship, but also a new kind of resilience. For now, though, let us rest in the soft glow of the 1920s. Jazz drifting through windows, bread buttered at tables, and tea poured gently into waiting cups. The 1930s arrive, and with them comes both quiet comfort and heavy shadows. The British Empire still stretches far, yet the world is unsettled. Economic depression spreads, voices for independence grow louder, and the clouds of another war begin to form. Still, within the vastness of empire, daily life carries on, anchored by meals, rituals, and small joys. Picture London in 1931. The streets are busy yet quieter than before, the weight of the Great Depression heavy on shoulders. Families stretch coins carefully. A mother buys bread, dripping, and a small bag of sugar, hoping it will last the week. Meals are simple: porridge in the morning, bread and butter for lunch, potatoes with cabbage or carrots for dinner. On Sundays, perhaps a small roast if fortune allows, with the Yorkshire pudding puffed golden in the oven. Isn't it gentle to imagine how, even in lean times, families found warmth in the steady comfort of food? In India, the call for independence swells. Gandhi leads the Salt March in 1930, walking slowly but firmly toward freedom. Along the way, families prepare simple meals of rice, lentils, and flatbread, shared in open courtyards. British officers dine in clubs, sipping tea, eating roast meats and puddings. The two worlds sit side by side, flavours mingling yet futures drifting apart. In Africa, Britain strengthens its hold but faces growing resistance. Farmers eat maize porridge, roasted ground nuts, and fresh fruit from the land. Settlers cook stews, bake bread, and drink tea brought from faraway plantations. The daily meals are different, yet the threads of empire tie them together, however unevenly. In Australia and New Zealand, the depression hits hard too. Families stretch meals with what they can: damper bread baked on coals, stews made from vegetables grown in backyard gardens, strong black tea boiled in tin pots. Children eat golden syrup sandwiches, cheap yet sweet, their laughter soft against the struggles of parents counting every coin. Isn't it soothing to think of such small comforts? Sweetness pressed between slices of bread, carrying hope through harder days. Back at sea, the Royal Navy continues its patrols. Sailors eat stews of potatoes and meat, biscuits softened in broth, and mugs of tea strong enough to steady them against cold winds. Their ships are modern now, steel hulls and engines powering them through waves, but the meals remain plain, grounding them in routine. In Britain, the 1930s also brings small delights that survive even hardship. Chocolate bars become more common, biscuits sold in tins brighten tables, and fish and chips wrapped in newspaper remain a favourite treat. Families listen to radios while they eat. Programmes of music, comedy or news drifting softly as bread is buttered and tea poured. Yet the decade is shadowed. Across Europe, unrest grows. In 1939, war begins again. The Second World War unfolds, and the empire is once more drawn into a conflict vast and consuming. Rationing begins immediately in Britain. Families line up for rations of sugar, tea and meat. Meals become careful, stews made with lentils, carrots and turnips, cakes sweetened with honey or treacle instead of sugar. Children still find small joys, sweets saved for special days, jam spread thinly on bread, cocoa sipped slowly at night. Across the empire, soldiers march once more. From India, Africa, Australia and Canada, men travel to battlefields far from home. Their rations are plain, tinned meat, biscuits, tea brewed quickly. Yet the meals tie them together, a reminder of the homes they left behind. Step softly into a London evening in 1939. The lamps are dimmed now, shaded for air raids. Families sit in kitchens, their meal simple. Vegetable soup, slices of bread, mugs of tea. Children giggle softly even as parents glance toward the darkened windows. The empire feels vast still, but the world is heavy, the decade closing with shadows deep across every shore. Isn't it calming to see, though, that even in such moments, food and ritual carried people forward? Bread shared, tea poured, laughter rising softly above fear. The empire, though strained, still lived in these small, steady comforts. As the 1930s close, the British Empire enters its most testing time. The 1940s will bring war, hardship, and resilience like never before. For tonight, though, let us rest gently in the glow of a kitchen lamp, the warmth of soup and the quiet hum of family voices. The 1940s open with thunder in the skies and fire on the ground. The Second World War grips the empire, pulling men and women from every corner of its reach into the struggle. Yet even in such dark times, daily meals, small rituals and quiet comforts hold families together. Picture London in 1940, under the glow of searchlights and the sound of distant sirens. Families huddle in shelters as bombs fall. Mothers carry baskets lined with cloth. Inside them, sandwiches of bread spread thin with jam or dripping, flasks of tea steaming faintly. Children clutch toffee or boiled sweets saved for comfort. The air outside may roar with chaos, but inside these small moments warmth endures. Isn't it soothing to imagine how tea, even in a tin cup underground, could steady hearts against fear? Rationing shapes every meal. Sugar, meat, butter, and eggs are measured carefully. Families learn to stretch ingredients. Vegetables turned into soups, carrots grated into cakes, dried milk whisked into puddings. Mock dishes become common. Mock goose made from potatoes and onions, mock cream from margarine and sugar. Yet laughter still rings around tables as children scrape bowls clean, savouring even the simplest flavours. Across the empire, soldiers fight far from home. Indian regiments march through deserts and jungles, their meals of rice, lentils and chapatis carried in tins. Australian and New Zealand troops eat bully beef, biscuits and billy tea boiled strong. African soldiers share maize porridge and stewed beans, standing side by side with comrades from across the world. The Empire's armies are vast, their meals humble but uniting them in common struggle. In Britain's towns and villages, allotments spring up. Families grow carrots, cabbages and potatoes in small plots, their hands deep in soil. Meals are filled with homegrown flavours, vegetable stews simmering, boiled potatoes served with a sprinkle of salt. Children help harvest, nibbling raw peas from pods, their laughter carrying in the air. Isn't it gentle to picture such scenes? Life rooting itself firmly even in hard times. In cities across India, Africa and the Caribbean, the war is felt not only in soldiers sent abroad, but in supplies diverted, shortages endured, sacrifices made. Meals are adjusted, celebrations smaller, yet the rhythms of rice, maize, bread and tea continue steadily, holding life together. By 1945, the war ends. Streets in London fill with cheers, crowds waving flags, music playing. Vendors sell pies, buns and lemonade to celebrating families. Soldiers return home, greeted with suppers of bread, potatoes and tea, simple meals that taste like victory. Children clutch chocolate bars gifted by American soldiers, their eyes wide with delight. For a moment, joy tastes sweet and steady again. Yet even in victory, change stirs. The war leaves Britain weary, its economy strained, its empire shaken. Calls for independence grow louder, especially in India, where voices rise steadily toward freedom. The empire still stretches far, but its strength feels less certain, its glow dimmer beneath the weight of war's cost. Step softly into a London evening in 1949. The lamps glow brighter now, peace has returned, yet rationing still lingers. A family gathers around a table, bread and cheese, a small bowl of potatoes, tea poured gently. The children laugh softly as they share the last sweet from a tin, their fingers sticky, their smiles calm. Outside, the empire begins to change, but inside, comfort remains. Isn't it calming to see how, even in war and hardship, the rituals of food, family and warmth carried people through? The empire's story may be grand, but its heart always lived in these quiet, steady moments. As the 1940s close, the British Empire stands at the edge of transformation. The next decade will bring independence, rebuilding, and a new vision of what it means to belong to Britain or to step away from it. And so, we drift onward into the 1950s, where the empire will begin to unravel, even as its memories remain woven in cups of tea and slices of bread. The 1950s arrive, and with them comes a new rhythm. The empire that once stretched unshakably across the globe now begins to loosen, its grip softening as independence movements rise. Yet in kitchens, in marketplaces, and in daily rituals, life carries on with its steady hum, the taste of empire lingering in every meal. Picture London in 1952. News spreads softly through radios and newspapers. King George VI has passed, and Elizabeth II takes the throne. Crowds gather, bunting flutters, and vendors sell pies, lemonade, and toffee apples to children waving small flags. Families at home celebrate quietly. Bread spread with jam, cups of tea sweetened with sugar, a sponge cake cut carefully into slices. Isn't it calming to imagine how a coronation, vast and ceremonial, was felt most tenderly in the sweetness of a shared dessert? Yet the decade is also one of farewells. In 1947, India had already stepped into independence, and by the 1950s, more colonies prepare to follow. In Ghana, voices rise for freedom. In Malaya, movements gather strength. Still, in daily life, meals remain grounding. Families in Accra share bowls of rice and stewed fish, while in Kuala Lumpur, satay grills on open fires. These meals carry the heartbeat of independence, familiar, local, steady. In Britain, rationing finally ends by the mid-1950s. Families rejoice at small luxuries returning. Sugar flows freely again, butter spreads thickly on bread, eggs crack into cakes richer than they've been in years. Children clutch chocolate bars once scarce, their hands sticky with melted sweetness. Cafes serve fish and chips wrapped in newspaper, tea poured strong and steady. Isn't it gentle to think how freedom from rationing felt like a feast, even in something as simple as buttered toast? In Africa, settlers and locals live side by side in growing tension. Farms yield maize, coffee and cocoa, meals made hearty with porridge, stews and bread baked in tin ovens. British families sip tea in verandas, while African families cook over fires, sharing cassava, beans and roasted meat. The empire is still present, but the balance is shifting. Daily meals grounding people even as politics swirl around them. In the Caribbean, voices for independence echo too. Families gather for suppers of rice and peas, fried plantains and salt fish, while British sailors stationed there eat tinned meats, bread and cups of tea. Music drifts through the night, steel drums and calypso carrying both joy and resistance. Back home, the 1950s are marked by rebuilding and a new optimism. Families gather around radios and later televisions as meals are shared. Meat pies, mashed potatoes, custard puddings. Children nibble on biscuits and drink glasses of milk sweetened with syrup. The empire may be shrinking, but the sense of connection through food, flavour and memory remains. Step softly now into an English evening in 1959. The lamps glow electric, televisions hum in parlours, and families sit together around simple tables. A pot of tea steams, bread and butter are passed, and children share chocolate biscuits with sticky smiles. Outside, the world changes quickly. Colonies stepping into freedom, Britain learning a new place in it all. But inside, the warmth of meals and family steadies life. Isn't it soothing to see how, even as the empire faded, the comfort of routine remained? Tea poured, bread sliced, jam spread, rituals carrying on as they always had. As the 1950s close, the British Empire is no longer what it was. Independence spreads, the red on the map fading. Yet the legacy of flavours, rituals and shared histories lingers. And so, we drift onward into the 1960s, where the empire will continue to dissolve and a new world will take its place, yet always with tea in hand and the sweetness of memory on the tongue. The 1960s arrive, and with them the empire begins to fade more swiftly than ever before. Independence movements sweep across Africa and Asia, one flag after another rising into the air. Yet, in kitchens, markets and family tables, the echoes of empire remain, softened into flavours, habits and rituals that people carry forward. Picture London in 1960. A family gathers around their television, a new centrepiece in the home. On the table sits shepherd's pie, carrots and peas on the side, followed by sponge pudding with golden syrup. A pot of tea steams beside them, sugar cubes stacked neatly in a bowl. Children clutch chocolate biscuits, their laughter mingling with the hum of the television set. Outside, newspapers report of colonies gaining independence, but inside, life carries on in its steady, familiar rhythm. Isn't it calming to imagine how history's great shifts were absorbed gently over suppers and sweet desserts? Across Africa, the 1960s are years of transformation. Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and many others step into independence. Families celebrate with meals rooted in tradition. Jollof rice, simmering with tomatoes and spices, roasted meats shared in gatherings, maize porridge thick and comforting. British families still living in colonies sip tea on verandas, eat roasts and puddings, but they do so now as guests in lands becoming their own. The empire loosens, but the mingling of flavours, habits and voices lingers. In the Caribbean too, nations move toward independence. Steel drums echo at celebrations, and families gather for feasts, rice and peas, fried fish, plantains and rum cakes soaked sweet. British sailors stationed there eat their own rations, bread, tinned meats, tea in enamel mugs. But they hear the music in the night, see the fireworks in the sky, and taste the change in the air. In India, independence is already more than a decade old, but the ties remain. Trains rattle through crowded stations, vendors selling samosas, pakoras and cups of steaming chai. British visitors sip the same tea, nibbling biscuits carried from home, the flavours crossing boundaries even as nations separate. Isn't it vivid to imagine the hum of a station platform filled with both spices and steam, history and hope? Back in Britain, the 1960s bring prosperity and change. Fish and chips remain a beloved meal, eaten from paper packets as families stroll streets lit with neon. Supermarkets begin to appear, shelves filled with new choices, canned goods, packaged biscuits, chocolates from faraway cocoa fields. Curry houses open in cities, run by South Asian immigrants, their meals spiced and rich, quickly beloved by locals. The flavours of empire, once distant, now come home in new, vibrant ways. Children enjoy sweets more freely again. Fruit gums, chocolate bars and toffees sold in colourful wrappers. Adults sip tea as always, though coffee grows more popular. Cafes humming with new energy. The empire may be shrinking, but its tastes remain woven into daily life. By the end of the decade, Britain itself feels different. The red patches on maps fade quickly, independence sweeping through Africa and the Caribbean. Yet the legacy of centuries lingers in language, trade, culture, and in kitchens, where tea, sugar, curry, cocoa, and spices still fill cupboards. Step softly now into a London evening in 1969. The street glows with neon lights. Music drifts from pubs and cafes. Inside a home, a family eats fish and chips, sharing bottles of lemonade, children unwrapping chocolate bars for dessert. The news on the television speaks of men walking on the moon and nations stepping into independence. But here, in this small parlour, the warmth of food and family steadies the moment. Isn't it soothing to see how, even as the empire itself faded, the comforts it once carried remained in simple meals and shared tables? History shifts, yet the rituals of food endure. As the 1960s close, the British Empire has all but dissolved, replaced by a new idea, the Commonwealth, a family of nations tied more by memory than by rule. The story of empire nears its end, yet its echoes live quietly in kitchens, cups, and flavours. And so, we drift onward into the final chapter, where we will reflect gently on the empire's twilight and the legacy it leaves behind. The 1970s and beyond bring the British Empire into its twilight. By now, most colonies have stepped into independence. The red patches that once covered the globe have faded, replaced by new flags, new nations, and new voices. Yet, the empire's memory lingers, woven into languages, customs, and the simplest of daily habits. Picture London in the 1970s. The city hums with change, music drifting from record shops, buses painted bright red, the air thick with the smell of fried fish, chips, and curry from corner shops. Families sit in living rooms watching colour television, a pot of tea steaming on the table, biscuits stacked on a plate. Children unwrap sweets, jelly babies, chocolate bars, toffees, laughing softly as wrappers crinkle. Isn't it calming to see how, even as politics shift, the comfort of sugar and tea carries on? Across the former empire, life beats steadily. In India, independence blooms into its own rhythm, families sharing chapatis, rice, dal, and sweets flavoured with cardamom. In the Caribbean, nations dance into their own futures, feasting on rice and peas, jerk chicken and rum cake at celebrations of independence. In Africa, new flags wave above cities, markets filled with maize, yams, cassava and roasted meats, grounding nations in their own roots once more. In Australia and New Zealand, the connection to Britain remains, but local voices grow stronger. Families eat lamb roasts and pavlovas, sipping tea that still ties them faintly to Britain's traditions. The taste of empire remains in small ways, but the future belongs firmly to their own paths. Back in Britain, the echoes of empire are felt not in colonies abroad, but in communities at home. Immigrants from India, Pakistan, the Caribbean, and Africa bring flavours with them. Curry houses become beloved fixtures, their spices warming cold British nights. Caribbean bakeries sell patties and sweetbreads. African shops offer maize meal, beans and spices. Isn't it gentle to imagine how the empire, once spread outward, now flowed inward? Its flavours, people and cultures weaving into Britain itself? By the end of the 20th century, the empire is no longer an empire at all, but the Commonwealth, a family of nations linked by choice, not command. The phrase, "the sun never sets on the British Empire," has faded into memory. Yet, in kitchens and tables, its legacy still hums softly. A pot of tea brewed in a small flat in Manchester, a spoonful of sugar stirred into a cup in Birmingham, a curry ordered from a takeaway on a Friday night, a chocolate bar nibbled by a child, cocoa grown far away. These are the quiet echoes of centuries past. Step softly now into a modern evening. The streetlights glow bright, cars hum on the roads, and families gather at tables as they always have. A meal is shared: bread, rice, soup, or stew. A cup of tea is poured, steam curling into the air. Children laugh as they pass biscuits, their voices carrying comfort into the night. The empire itself is gone, but its memory lingers not in grand monuments, but in these small, ordinary rituals of food, warmth, and family. Isn't it soothing to see how history, vast and complicated, always returns to the simplest things: a shared meal, a warm drink, a laugh in the quiet of evening? And so, the story of the British Empire closes, not with thunder, but with calm. Its rise, its height, its fall, all folded gently into memory. What remains are the echoes, the flavours, the habits carried into the present. May these memories guide you into peaceful dreams. If you drifted off during this gentle journey, let me know below. Sweet dreams always. Good night, dear listener, until next time when we drift again together.